Senior Advisor at the Water Center at Penn. Today we'll feature Rekha Menon-Varma, Managing Partner at Vertaeon and Wharton MBA alum of 2006. Rekha will discuss water risk and global manufacturing perspectives. Marissa Rosen, Penn MES alum of 2012 and founder of Climate Social, will serve as today's moderator. Rekha and Marissa, thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to your remarks. Before we start, I will ask everyone to please mute their microphone. The event will be recorded as well. So Marissa, I think you're ready to start. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Joanne, and thank you to the Water Center at the University of Pennsylvania for hosting this event today, and thank you all for joining us this afternoon. It is my pleasure to be here and to host and moderate today with Rekha. As Joanne nicely said, I'm an alum of the University of Pennsylvania Master's in Environmental Studies program 2012, and in 2015, I started my own company focused on digital marketing and sustainable business called Climate Social. Today, I'm introducing Rekha. She is a 2006 Wharton MBA graduate and managing partner of Vertaeon LLC. She's brought business insights to the forefront in envisioning and executing the development of innovative risk, ESG, and market analytics on the SaaS platform. Vertaeon is a thought leader in this area with a focus on manufacturing sectors, including automotive. Rekha has extensive leadership experience in the deployment of enterprise and supply chain risk programs, sustainability programs, CEO and board level reporting and growth strategy assessments. Prior to this, she worked in the US chemical industry at Lyondell Chemical. She received an MS in chemical engineering from Auburn University and her MBA from Wharton. She's the co-president of the Wharton Club of Atlanta and a member of the 100+ Women Strong program at Auburn University Engineering. Rekha is a part of the alumni advisory, or was rather part of the alumni advisory group of Wharton IGEL, and is a frequent speaker at national conferences. Welcome, Rekha.
Thank you, Marissa. That was a very nice introduction. I think this is a wonderful and relevant topic. So thank you, Penn Water Forum, for hosting it. I'm going to share my screen and then we can go through this presentation as a discussion backdrop towards the end of the meeting. Can everyone see my slides? Okay.
You can put on presentation mode. There you go. Perfect.
So water, the way I want to take this is we have 20 to 30 minutes and that we want to utilize it to give a broader perspective in terms of where does water fit in within a corporate risk perspective. How do we see this from a global city and company point of view? And then we switch gears and seeing some of these external risks that's coming up, such as natural disaster risks, which are increasing in frequency. And then towards the end, I want to mention a bit about how can we measure, track, keep that effort ongoing, and how do we enable technology and data analytics to do this. So this is the broad outline. And at the end of this, please do ask any questions or give us comments, and would love to hear that. So just to give a very brief introduction to Vertaeon, we are a data analytics company. We offer, as Marissa mentioned, risk, ESG, and market analytics platforms for global manufacturing corporations. We are a small team, but we do have 100+ years of combined experience in very leading manufacturing corporations in the US and EU. And our expertise comes from quite a bit of domain expertise in the enterprise risk, corporate strategy, and business development in conjunction with supply chain and, of course, data analytics and modeling. And we have a very specific focus in terms of industrial, automotive, machinery type value chains. So manufacturing is sort of at the core of what we do. We are in the Southeast US, we are in Atlanta, Georgia, as well as in Florida. So if we look at ESG risks, this is being reported as sustainability. We didn't term this as ESG risks since around, I would say, till about 2018, when COSO, the enterprise risk framework, changed and integrated ESG into this. So before that, if you think about a company's risk reporting, we reported on financial, compliance, operational risks. In 2018, ESG was brought in, and we did have a conference on that at the Sustainable Brands in Philadelphia, the New Metrics conference, to discuss this. So within these ESG risks, we are talking about climate-related risks, which are, let me move my screen a little bit, which are energy use, emissions, scope 1, 2, 3 emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, carbon, and those kinds of things. And second, which is not as talked about as the emissions or energy, is water-related risks. And then waste generation, recycling and reuse, and last but not least, the social aspect of things, which is health and safety, which will get tied into water-related risks as well. And then there is the business ethics aspects in terms of bribery, corruption, fraud. There is again an interrelated risk with respect to water. So if you think of this, it's the scope of this is not one facility, it's hundreds of company facilities. And if you extrapolate that, as we do, into the supply chain, then you're starting to look at thousands of supply chain facilities as well. So that's the broader context of it. And you can see that within that risk spectrum, ESG is very important for companies right now. So if why is water being brought up as a key risk? For manufacturing, this is a key resource. Without water, there is no operation. And this is one of the emerging risks in terms of the scarcity of water, the security of water supply, and the reliability of it. So there is a cost associated with it. And recently, I think mid last year, Barclays did make an estimate saying consumer staples, which has a very high exposure to water and water risk, the cost can be up to 200 billion. They also estimated that to proactively address it, it could be around 10, 11 billion. So you can imagine it's a fraction of that, but you need to take steps towards it. Their estimate was it's 20 to 50% EBITDA impact, which is the earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization for consumer product companies. As you can see, it's a highly impactful metric for companies. And another recent trend that we have been seeing is that more companies are mentioning water in their risk discussion in the 10K filings. So it was around 40, now we see around 60 companies reporting. We don't know how it's going to be in 2022. So it's coming up. For us, how do we relate to water stress? So if we look at a company's own operations, its global footprint, do we have enough water, the right quality of water to continue those operations? The second level will be if we start thinking about investments, whether it's through greenfield expansions, M&A JV, water is becoming a key concern for due diligence. The third part is if you get into a crunch, if a country or city gets into a crunch, there will be prioritization in terms of the local community, the key sectors such as agriculture, before you will be considered for water. So that's another perspective that we are seeing. But if you think of key business risks, it comes from the availability of water, the reliability of that supply, quality of it, and the regulatory compliance. And the underlying risks will be reputational. So if there is an issue with the water that you are discharging or the quality of water that you are using for your operations versus local community needs, there could be a strong impact on reputational risk, which can affect your brand image. The underlying other important risk is the financial, as I mentioned, that this will affect the profitability part of it. So if we look at globally, this is World Resources Institute's aqueduct map. If we look at this globally, we can see that there is everything is yellow, going from yellow to orange to red to dark red. And there they have monitored, and the thing is that it's going from low to extremely high risk. And some of these large production hubs in Asia, in India and China, in the west coast of the US, in Eastern Europe, you can see the constraint that's coming up. So the thing that we can do is to superimpose the sites on top of this and see, are the sites already at a place which is highly water stressed? So that gives you an idea as to what is the situation today. And this kind of a metric or a measurement or a tool that has to be done for all the sites and things like that If you look at how the cities are doing, so this is CDP data, the Carbon Disclosure Project. We took a look at the cities, how they are performing. The global cities, every country, I think they analyzed a number of cities around the globe. If you look at magnitude versus probability, which are the two key metrics of a risk assessment, if you see that probability of a water risk is increasing, the magnitude of that is also increasing. You can see only a few of the cities are in green. The rest of them are in yellow, orange, red, dark red. So that's another factor that we need to keep in mind, that globally, there is a water stress issue. City level, there is a water stress issue. If you take it to the corporate level, there has been significant progress. I mean, we have to give it to corporations in terms of making a serious effort in measuring the withdrawals, measuring the usage, as well as planning for replenishment and quality of water. But there's still a long way to go. So as an example, CDP gives a rating to companies for environmental disclosure, and only around 118 people got the A rating. So in the context of 10,000 people actually submitting that disclosure, and it's only 10,000 companies, and you can imagine there are hundreds of thousands of companies in the world who haven't reported. So companies, when they look at water stewardship, they would have the water policies, metrics, key metrics related to, I would say, 3 buckets: withdrawal, consumption or usage, discharge or replenishment. And within that, there is strong focus on what kind of quality, because that's important to measure the pollutants that's in the water that's being discharged. And then the recycling, how much can be recycled? Can we replenish almost close to 100% of that water? So there has been metrics, and people have been monitoring it, tracking it, and that self-reported data comes through either annual report or sustainability report or regulatory aspect of things. So this is what quality is something that's being monitored. And for the student audience out there, I would say you will hear 3 reporting agencies when you graduate and start your work, which is GRI, Global Reporting Initiative, CDP, which was formerly known as the Carbon Disclosure Project, and SASB. So GRI, I think 2018 was one of the latest, also have metrics in terms of withdrawal, consumption, and discharge. And CDP has a water program in addition to their climate change, forest, and cities program. SASB is something more relevant in terms of sector. So SASB, Sustainable Accountable Standards Board, took this from a sector perspective in terms of, is this relevant to me? If I am a mining company, yes, it's very relevant. For a services company, it may not be. So they did identify a few sectors where water should be measured. I was part of the SASB review committee for 2 sectors, which was the pulp and paper and chemicals. So these are some of the discussions that we do, that is this relevant to a particular sector. And then if you start looking at creating a water program or having water metrics, some of the other things to keep in mind will be, it's relevant to UN SDG goals, which is Sustainable Development Goals. This is the number 6, ensure availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all. If we look at, so Vertaeon, we compare companies in terms of ratios. So there is the absolute measure of water withdrawal, but also how much water is being used per company's revenue. So the left is basically global set of companies, consumer staples, which is a large user of water, and how do they perform. So you can see the concentration hubs such as US, Western Europe, in Asia. And the thing that I didn't see at first glance is that there's no difference in terms of the used revenue for the people who reported. So this is a subset of companies who are utilizing water, but from the people who have reported over the years, didn't see too much of a difference there. In terms of the water withdrawal itself, you can see on the right, the people in consumer staples, a subset of them who is utilizing more water than less. So that part of it. Hold on. Okay. So you can see the one that's on the right is, I think this is Coca-Cola, and you can see some of the big users, Tyson and Nestle and Kimberly-Clark, some of the others. But this gives you an idea in terms of the color is EBITDA. Again, earnings, with respect to earnings, how is their usage, that perspective. So this is a good way to compare corporations. How are their performance? Is this year over year, is the risk increasing or decreasing? Is there more of a financial impact? Now, any questions at this point, or should we move on? So we took a look at the global footprint. We are looking at the city level water consumption and risks. And we're looking at the corporate perspectives in terms of the water stewardship as well as the water risks side of things. And we are also comparing them based on their financial performance with respect to water. So that gives you an idea about the water intensity and how the performance is. Now, if we switch gears and look at natural disaster, so natural disaster is something that's related to location risks, and this has been increasing in frequency, in severity. And last year, I think we saw two distinct types of natural disaster risks that's affecting water. One was the drought. There's no water. So as an example, Taiwan in April 2021 had a significant issue because of this. Has been lack of rainfall, a decline in precipitation level, probably much higher than average of last decade. So what happened was government had to ration water for households and businesses. Now, if you remember, in 2021, we were also going through a semiconductor crunch. So automotive industries and the other industries were looking for chips, and there was not enough being manufactured, or rather the demand exceeded much more than what the current capacity could provide. And one of the biggest upstream providers, Taiwan Semiconductor, their plants are in Taiwan. And this created an issue in terms of several industries need it. There is a significant crunch going on, but at the same time, there is limited water. At that time, government did allow high-value operations to continue using water, so they need high-quality water as well. And you can see on the right in that chart in 2019, 2015 to 2019 data, the water intensity has been going up. So that's another thing, but the issue was solved. So eventually, if it had continued, it could have created some level of social tension for industries to use water, whereas the communities in the agriculture sectors don't have enough. But countermeasures are being taken at the government level in terms of infrastructure improvements, and TSMC as well in terms of water conservation and recycling. And we have it here as well. In the US, we had significant, I think there was a state of emergency in 2 counties in California last year. And it's also the classification has reached like 49.9. So severe categories and severe risks based on that water stress. And as I showed in that second chart, you can see it in California being bright red. The other side of things is too much water, so flood risk. So this again, we are seeing some level of unexpected event occurrence as well, and increasing frequency and severity of storms, and which creates, we have seen this in the US, in the Gulf Coast, as well as in the Southeast US. We have seen it with typhoons in Philippines. We have seen it with floods in China. Significant impact to people as well as company operations. So if you look at damages, it's plant property and equipment, it's site operations, it's the local community. And to the right, this picture is the flood in Germany last year, mid-year last year, sort of unexpected, quite a bit of damage in Germany. So this would not have been the first location that we think of in terms of flood damage, but it happened. So the costs are estimated to be the order of 13.5 billion in 2022. This is estimated by Arup in December 2021. So it's a pretty recent estimate. So we have to think of this factor as well. So on one hand, there is existing stress at the global level and the city level. Corporations need water because they're expanding and using it. And then in conjunction with that, external risk factors, which people cannot control, we can only prepare for it. We cannot control the flood or the hurricanes or other things. So that's another side of things. Now, if we ask this question, given that there is water risk, so what? So financial impact, definitely one of them, but the safety impact of that as well. These two are very, very significantly damaging to a corporation. So I want to give one example. Whale is a big mining company. they have had dam failures, not one failure, repeated failures in Brazil. So in 2015, the Samarco JV, which is a JV between Vale and BHP Billiton, another mining giant, it failed. Had one of the largest environmental disasters in Brazil, released so much toxic waste, and that was in 2015. In 2019, another failure, which was sad because around 300 people were killed during that, and then in 2021, so related to that, around 7 billion compensation has been, I think, reported. Staff is also possibly facing charges. There could be additional 2 billion costs coming up. So there's a significant people impact as well as monetary impact there. In 2021, there is another report saying there is a third dam, which is decommissioned, is also set to fail. So if this is happening, I think we should ask this question: can this be? Is there a countermeasure to this? And yes, there is. I think on one part, this operations in silos. So if a country knew of a risk or a department knew of a risk, how do we get that to the level of senior decision making? So that's one thing. So there is that governance change. There is that transparency of information or a risk. And then the second part is, it's not only your operations, it's also operations of your JVs, which means, with your partners, what's happening at those sites. And the third part is focus on EHS, environment, health, and safety. So this is something, this can impact the survival of the company itself. It could end up filing for bankruptcy if it's not managed correctly. And the last part is integrated risk management, something that we strongly propose, because for that, you need to see the data, you need to see the analysis, you need to see the insights, and those insights have to get to the right people. So the question is, can we get all these things in one place and share it to the top? So that's sort of the shift to how do we do this? And so there are three big aspects to it. On first hand, you have to measure it, water-related metrics. At the site level, at the business unit level, you think of the whole company, the hundreds of facilities level. And then you expand that into thousands of companies and their facilities. So that becomes quite a big picture right there. And how do we track this? Because it cannot be static measurement done at one time, and then we will do it sometime 2 years later. It has to be monthly, quarterly, yearly. As the information is coming in, can we update our own performance and risk, as well as our supply chain's performance and risks? So the idea is to make sure that we have enough redundancy in the system. Idea is also to make sure that there is no surprise or shock to our system that we have to suddenly stop everything. And we strongly get to a point where we want to propose some mitigation action items and to ensure business continuity. So are there action plans to improve water efficiency? Are there, can you enhance safety, fail-safe mechanisms? When you plan new investments, when you plan new M&A JV projects, can we keep water risks as part of due diligence? So these are some of the actions that we'll have to think of. And from a business continuity perspective, as I mentioned, it is impossible to handle that volume and volatility of information manually. So there is a need for consolidation and automation. And this is where cloud computing comes in. We have enough power now to handle terabytes of information, to collect it, to clean it, to process it. And data itself is not enough. You have to process it. You have to develop some insights. What does this say? What's my priority? What are the top 5 actions? And that's where that gets led to mitigation planning and growth goals. So I will leave you with that thought as to, how do we use this and how do we leverage it? This is where we spend a lot of time in understanding not only ESG risks, but financial and compliance and operational risks, and bringing this together and understanding this compounding interaction of these risks as well. So that's my presentation, and we can open to Q&A and other discussion.
Great, thank you so much, Rekha. Great presentation. I do have a few questions for you, so I'll get started. And meanwhile, everybody here, there's 28 participants total. We'd love to have your questions. Please click on that chat box down on the bottom of your Zoom screen and type your questions so I can see them and ask them to Rekha, okay? To start, who is really your target audience, Rehka, with Vertaeon, with this great system that you just presented to us? Who are the key decision makers within a client or potential company that you're really trying to market this service to?
So we are sector agnostic, but having said that, given the team's background and the things that's going on with the manufacturing sector, we have developed a very strong focus in that area. And the key clients are in the US and EU with global operations. So people who have this kind of complexity that needs way beyond normal systems, that those are normally our clients, but it can also go to very small companies who don't have resources to do this. In terms of what was the second part?
Who would be the key decision makers within the
Good question.
companies that are using your services?
Yeah, so we normally would talk to the risk and audit department. We would also talk to the operational folks in terms of their own operations and the supply chain leadership. So those will be the three aspects of it. And sometimes the risk department comes under the CFO, and because of the financial implications that we are talking about, so it's the CFO's group as well. So ideally, this we try to elevate this to the C-level if we can, and to the board level, because enterprise risk becomes a part of the board governance issue.
Exactly, that makes sense. And what regions of the world have you seen the highest uptake of users of Vertaeon, and why so?
We have seen it globally, actually, but I would say Europe and then US, we've seen it a little bit more. There is more, I don't know if the centric nature of Europe is bringing into picture or the level of operations, but we are seeing some traction in the US as well.
So specific to the water issues, can you share a positive outcome from one company that's been impacted directly because of their using Vertaeon?
Yes, I think this measurement that I mentioned in terms of water withdrawal versus how much you're replenishing, we could work successfully in terms of understanding how much water was withdrawn from each of the watershed regions and how much was replenished. And it turned out to be a very good result. And this could be used for not only internal reporting purposes or internal or external reporting, but also to let the local community or regulators know that you are actually not only depleting so much water, but you are very successful in replenishing it as well. And then that's where you bring all these things together and you have this excellent visualization based on this science-based targets. And that was very helpful and very successful in doing that. And I think in some cases, if you look at the internal risk reports to even highlight specific areas that can be used for decision making, that has been very successful as well.
Great, thank you for that, Rehka. I do have a few questions coming in. The first one is from Lee Gariando. We have a message. She says, how do companies think about water risk from a materiality point of view? She says, I assume it is minimal at a business level. Do you calibrate ESG risks differently?
Yes, this is the SASB metric that I mentioned. Yeah, I think materiality is a very strong focus in terms of how much water as a sector that you use. So take mining as an example, and that's there it comes into picture. So what that means is that that becomes you need to have X number of metrics for that particular area in terms of sustainability, not in terms of risk. So this is where you start forming if water is important to you in terms of policy, in terms of measuring the usage, consumption, withdrawal, and quality. Now, the moment it turns to ESG risk, you are asking the other question. This is highly material to me. It can stop my production in this area. So this is bringing into a discussion in the, I think, MD&A into the annual report itself, which means before that, you have to discuss it at the board level. So there it gets elevated very highly. But for that, the corporation has to identify that it's material for them. It's a good idea to use something like SASB as a metric, And the other thing that we have done is competition benchmarking. So if all your peers are doing this, your associations are promoting it, other industry nonprofits are asking your sector to do it, I think you have to probably rush to it.
Thank you. Thanks for that answer. Next question is from Annabelle. Once companies monitor and track the water risk to their operations, what do you think will be the most relevant actions to take from the private sector? For example, private reforestation to protect watersheds. That's the question. Once companies monitor and track the water risk to their operations, what do you think will be the most relevant actions to take from the private sector?
Yeah, I think the replenishment is a key aspect of things, that recycling, and the first part will be recycling part of it, that to see how much can be recycled. And then the second part is the replenishment aspect of things, that can you replenish almost all of it back to the community or water systems where you took it from. And the third part is to see the quality. In some operations, we need ultra pure water. What quality are we giving back? That will be the third part of it.
Great. Question from Joanne. Rehka, how did your education impact your decision to pursue your work in water risk and sustainability?
So I have to say, after Wharton, I jumped into corporate strategy, and 3 years into that, right after the financial crisis in 2009, got tapped into enterprise risk. And that's where this started coming up, sustainability as a measure. Initially, we looked at it as a mitigation for some of the risks that were coming up. And then the CEO asked me to do a sustainability strategy specific to a corporation. And that's when all these things started coming up, in terms of materiality, in terms of ESG, and in terms of integrating ESG into strategy. And then with the 2018 change in risk framework, I could leverage all that Wharton education and the experience into saying, yes, we can do that. We are ready for it. And that was the presentation at Numetrics, Sustainable Brands. So yes, it's been very helpful, and it's continuing to be helpful because I think you mentioned what Nigel. This is where we had corporate and academic experts coming together in terms of discussing, and that how can we, and Joanne was the leadership in that. So this has helped as well.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. Joanne was wonderful at Wharton, Nigel. That's where we all met like 10 years ago, right?
I know.
From Hugh Share, thank you for joining today, Hugh. What are your thoughts about flipping the discussion from risk to business opportunities, such as engaging companies and brands to help solve the many complex water issues communities face, i.e. public policies, access to water and sanitation, et cetera? And that goes way beyond efficiency work.
That's true. I think several companies, I think especially in the apparel sector, have started, kicked off quite a bit of work. And I think Gap is doing quite a bit of work, because there is a social aspect to this. I mean, water is not like energy. The quality of water, the availability of water, it affects people. It affects, and I think I read that it affects women more. So there is this very significant social impact. And companies are taking steps towards, collaborating with the government agencies, collaborating with the nonprofits, with the public-private partnerships. And I think something like this WRI data that I mentioned, Coca-Cola provided quite a bit of data into that. So that kind of collaboration to make something happen is going on. And I think there is very significant focus now to make sure that it's not burdening the local community, but rather enhancing their quality of life. So yes, we do see that, and we do see that from large corporations. And I think that discussion is happening very, very strongly.
Great. Thank you. I have another couple questions, but please, everybody, go ahead and you can either direct them to me or to everybody here. Send other questions if you so wish.
Yeah.
Meg asks, much attention is devoted to water scarcity and flooding versus flooding. Can you discuss risk related to water quality specifically?
Yes, this is an area we haven't delved into too much. I mean, we do take a look at the issues with that and the nutrients, how that is changing. But as you can imagine, you know, the Michigan Flint River issue and things like that, how much of an issue that is causing. And then the discharge of water. So I mentioned Vail Dam failure, that first disaster, that amount of water and the toxins that got into the water was really, I mean, devastating issue. So this kind of a what should I say, the discharge or the quality of that discharge or an unexpected failure that's causing, it can impact quite a bit. So yes, from a quality perspective, there is regulatory compliance on that, and companies have to follow. There is new directives that's coming up. I think in mid-2010s, EU came out with a directive on non-financial reporting, and ESG is part of it. So in conjunction with that, quality will be assessed as well. And new directives are coming out as well. So yes, there is a focus on quality, and we do see the impact of quality that's affecting local communities.
Thank you. And we have one more question here. Could you expand on what water governance could look like?
That's an interesting question. Are you thinking of from a corporate perspective?
So a question and a direct message to me from the audience. So I don't have more on that. Could you, but her question is, yes, corporate, corporate point of view. Yes.
So from a governance perspective, I think people think of this as an operational issue. I think that's, or a sustainability issue, and it goes way beyond that. Yes, it can stop your operations. But from a governance perspective, I think there are, you have to think of multiple dimensions. On one hand, there is the ethics of it, the business ethics side of things. So true governance in terms of, am I really following the social license to operate? Am I really providing safety to my employees in operating these things? Are they going to be an issue with something bursting and, you know, the dam failure as an example? So there is the business ethics aspect of it. And then I think water being in some cases such a valuable commodity, we also have to think of the bribery and corruption and fraud aspect of things. So for us, that's a strong governance motive to change things. The second side of governance is that, are there strong systems in place or under monitoring in terms of understanding, is there going to be a failure? So that would be the second aspect of governance that goes directly into the operations. But not only that, to the communication also to the top level, saying that I need investment here now. So that kind of a governance aspect as well. And this is where that silo type mentality that I mentioned, that has to be, there has to be more transparency within the company itself. It cannot be that one country manager knew about the issue or one JV partner knew about the issue and we did not at the corporate level. So that will be the third aspect of governance. But I think for me, at the end of it, it comes down to protecting your employees, because the local community is basically your employees and your employees' families or their friends. So that has to be, the safety has to be number one in that corporate governance perspective. But it definitely has that social and governance aspect of business as well. Great question.
Fantastic. Thank you for your answer. And from Kimberly Cox, can you answer this question? When it comes to transnational companies, what should be their approach in mitigating risks in hydropolitically sensitive regions, such as the Aswan Dam and Egypt?
Yeah, I don't know specifically about Egypt, but I have heard issues in other countries. So that's something that this is a true geopolitical risk, because if in case of a constraint, like when it's available in plentiful, it may not be a risk, but when it starts becoming scarce or if there is water stress in that area, then it definitely becomes a geopolitical issue. So at that stage, we do track quite a bit of geopolitical risk factors. And then you start looking at property rights. You start looking at how is the law, or is there a nationalistic movement as to who gets priorities. So it will come to that discussion. And in some cases, you may have to have a JV partner to address that. So we have seen geopolitical risks come up in sensitive areas, and we have seen some level of priority changes happening because of that, and the need to shift your own organizational plans at that stage. Yeah, all three of it.
Got it. Thank you. One more incoming question here is, in your opinion, what companies are leading the way for addressing water risks? For example, are companies like Deloitte, Coke, Goldman Sachs, Dow, Suez, Veolia, et cetera? It'd be great to know who our corporate champions are in this area.
Good question. So water, I think there are the treatment water companies itself. Some of them you just mentioned, Suez and Veolia and people like that. But I think the corporate perspectives, very large users like Coke, Coca-Cola in Atlanta, Nestle, some of the apparel users, some of the electronics manufacturers, and you can see champions coming up there as well. And as I mentioned, TSMC has made an effort to change their uses and recycling and conservation part of things. So I think each sector we have seen champions within that sector, whether it's food and beverage or some of the household and personal care sectors. But I think there are sectors that need quite a bit of improvement as well. We see mining as one of the things that we're consistently coming up in terms of poor safety records, poor resource uses, and things like that. There are sectors which are using quite a bit of water. So I think some sectors, it is up to the leaders to also take next steps. It's not like it's still a journey. You can still improve. So I would say a number of them that we have seen from an investor perspective. I mean, you mentioned some of the financial institutions, and we haven't seen water being incorporated as much as the energy side of things, carbon emissions. So is it the question to ask is, is this being incorporated as an overall ESG aspect? Or I think, do we need to elevate water on its own in that perspective from an investor stakeholder perspective as well? So there can be champions in that as well, that somebody who says, yes, my investment decisions, now I'm going to start looking at water also in addition to energy and emissions. So.
Great. Thank you for that answer. I had another question for you. Do wider industry groups, such as your affiliation with the SPLC, which is the Sustainable Packaging Leadership Council, or the Southeast Energy Efficiency Alliance, which Vertaeon is involved with, how do they help you continue to forge new relationships beneficial to the water sector?
So SPLC is Sustainable Purchasing Leadership Council. So they are looking at, they have quite a bit of public and private collaborations and members in that. So I'm a board member, and I think there is an alignment in that vision as to, how do we use these ESG factors, and how do we enhance the performance of companies? And it's not only companies, there's also strong presence of academia, I think including Penn is part of that. So that kind of, I would say those collaborations enhance the way we look at things. I think they have very strong climate change, sustainability metrics and assessment parts, and we kind of complement that with our vision into risk analysis using cloud computing, SaaS platforms. So ESG from a risk perspective as well. So that's that connection. And then from SEIA's perspective, SEIA is Southeast Energy Efficiency Alliance. We had a webinar last week on EV value chain risks. So ESG being a part of it, electric vehicles or automotive industry uses quite a bit of water as well. So there, I think their perspective is more on the energy side, electric mobility side of things. But having said that, the ESG part of it, we are bringing into discussion, including water. Yeah, both are great organizations, and if you haven't read more about them, do check out SPLC's Sustainable Purchasing Leadership Council and CIS, Southeast Energy Efficiency Alliance. So for the audience, if you want to check it out.
Thank you for that. At this point, I do not have any other questions in queue. one more question just came in, perfect timing. Hugh, what are your thoughts about the huge increase in reporting? And do you have any suggestions to get that under control so sustainability folks can work more in implementing solutions? That's a great question.
That is a great question, actually. Yeah, I feel that I hear you, because sustainability has become sort of a reporting role rather than seeing what's happening. Should I improve my key performance indicators? How do I connect with decision makers, and how do I get this implemented? So I think there are a number of companies who are working on consolidating, if we can report it once, so that you don't have to answer the same questions for different entities again and again. So that's one initiative that we have seen, that if we can consolidate it, some of that reporting. The second aspect that we are seeing is that in terms of internal operations itself, if you have a system like this, like the one that we are talking about, can you capture it simultaneously as you get it, rather than this once a year, this huge effort that takes up all your time? It's literally more than preparing the annual report to collect this existing information, actually, in different departments and different countries. So can we have a system where the sustainability department doesn't have to spend as much time in doing that? And then sort of making this uniform, that if this is energy and emissions, it is energy and emissions for everyone. It's not a different thing that we need to keep track of or calculate. And it goes for water as well. So if we have 10 metrics, if we know that who's collecting this, where it's being collected, it could be every site. Bring that together, use the available packages or tools out there to make that happen. And definitely, I agree with you that we need to cut the time down in terms of collecting this information for reporting, and making that reporting happen to taking this to decision makers and implementing some of these some of the insights that's coming out of this measurements.
Yes, perfect. And one more question that is coming at me with a direct message is, in your opinion, what is the number one thing an individual can do to reduce water risk?
From an individual perspective, I think we see conservation in terms of, don't leave the tap on as you're brushing, and other things such as how much water we use. Do we have reusing, small recycled systems, rainwater collection at home, things like that from an individual perspective. This is something that we haven't looked into too much, but I also read that, from a corporate perspective or individual perspective, water cost is not something that we think of. We think of utility bills, but not too much on the side of water, but more on the energy. So that's another part of it. And it could be related to the pricing as well, because it's priced so low. So as a commodity, that's not something that we think of. We talk more about the gas prices always than water prices. So that's another part of it. And that's more broader change. But from an individual perspective, the use of water, coming up with ideas for workplace, water use reduction, also incorporating some of these suggestions for corporate water metrics. Some of those things we can do as individuals.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you for all of your answers, Rekha. And one from Emily Newton.
Yes.
There has been an increasing focus on companies' entire supply chain impacts and monitoring their suppliers' ESG performance. In your experience, have you seen more companies looking at their suppliers' ESG performance and meaningfully integrating this information on their suppliers into their procurement decision-making process?
Yes, excellent question. And this is a focus area for us, actually, the supply chain part of it. And it's not only a nice to have system now, it's a must have, because there are three, I think US came out with a supply chain due diligence for forced labor in December. Germany already had come out with something in mid 2021, and EU, European Union, is working on a directive trying to look at supply chain due diligence again. For forced labor. So that gives you an idea as to the importance of ESG that's coming up. From our perspective, we started before that a couple of years back in 2019, actually, to start looking at the entire supply chain. And we, of course, thought of ESG as core risk. So we incorporated that in addition to financial compliance geopolitical and other risks. So here you start seeing, in terms of risk scores, a sub-score for ESG, you can start seeing who's performing the best from a green to red spectrum and who's performing the worst. And that gives us an idea to prioritize a mitigation file or a business continuity file. We can also do something like a location mapping, which shows you which sites of suppliers are in water stressed areas. So that's another one. So yes, there has been, and our push is to make sure that this gets to decision makers in terms of mitigation suggestion. We cannot make it happen there, but that's we want to highlight that issue and prioritize it. And then internally, we have seen people take action within the companies in terms of implementing some of these action items. So it's a key aspect that's coming up, supply chain.
Absolutely. Thank you, Emily, for that question. And thank you, Rekha, for your answer. Looks like we are about ready to close. I'm going to turn this back over to Joanne to share announcements from the Water Center. Please look at the chat here. There is some information coming out to everybody from the Water Center to you on this chat box. So please take a look. And Joanne, turning it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Rehka and Marissa. Rehka, your presentation was just amazing. It's clear to see that, Penn and Wharton really produce wonderful work. Your work is amazing. Marissa, you did a great job moderating. We really enjoyed hearing from you both. Regarding our next meeting, we are going to have a business meeting on May the 20th. We will not have a speaker that day, but we will be planning our events for the fall. So I hope you will attend. I will be sending out a thank you to all participants to include this recording. And thank you so much for being part of the Penn Alumni Water Forum. We really, really appreciate your participation. And Rehka and Marissa, thank you again. I hope everyone has a wonderful belated St. Patrick's Day and beautiful spring weekend. Thank you, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks
Bye-bye.
for attending.
Thank you.